Colorado versus James Egan Holmes, case number 12 CR 1522. The record should reflect that Mr. Holmes is present with his attorneys and the prosecutors are present as well. Are we ready to proceed? Ms. Titch McGuire, you may call your next witness, please.
Agent Jeremy Phelps.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, sir. My name is Jeremy Phelps, J-E-R-E-M-Y, last Phelps, P-H-E-L-P-S. I've been assigned to this case as a lead investigator for the FBI. And, Your Honor, I appreciate the opportunity to address the court. First, I would like to let the victims affected by this event know, not today, not tomorrow, but forever will you be remembered in our thoughts and prayers. Mr. Brockler, you and your team are true professionals, and I want you to know that the FBI stands by you and your team today as we did prior to any verdicts. I will forever remember the phone call I received around 12:50 a.m., July 20th, 2012, from my supervisor. He stated that someone went into the Century 16 Theater in Aurora with an assault rifle with multiple deceased. To this date, I can't remember a time I moved so fast. I initially responded to the defendant's apartment about 40 minutes after receiving that first call. Then I was directed to go to Gateway High School to assist with interviewing those that were in the theater. A few days later, I walked the apartment of the defendant and also, lastly, the theater. Forever will I remember the images, smells, and the scene of complete chaos, something I've never seen before. However, my job responsibilities haven't stopped, even as I stand here today. I could have not have asked for a better group of men and women to work with at the Aurora Police Department, to include Detective Craig Apple, Sergeant Matthew Files, and at the time, Lieutenant O'Keefe. The FBI has three words on its shield: fidelity, bravery, integrity. Each one of these pillars were represented throughout this case, not only by law enforcement, but the victims and families affected by this horrific event. Due to the actions of the defendant, this case has involved countless agents, support staff, local bomb technicians who helped render safe the defendant's apartment, which was booby-trapped, our evidence response team, who was involved not only at the apartment, but also inside and outside of the theater. Images for those folks, which they will never forget. We also had offices in different countries, multiple field offices across the country domestically, every discipline of the lab located in Quantico, Virginia, and those employees affected, along with additional specialties. I wish I could stop there. But we also received support from the U.S. Attorney's Office and the Department of Justice. Each and every individual has been affected in different ways, for which I could spend hours discussing, but they're going to heal in their own ways. The actions of the defendant are irreversible. However, rest assured that the actions of the defendant don't have us walking with our heads down. We walk away smarter, resolute, and with newfound friendships. We will not walk away from adversity, but determined to run to it. We owe it to the people we serve, and will continue to do so. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Titch McGuire?
Thank you, Your Honor. Megan Sullivan asked if it would be okay with the court if she could show one picture for the court to see.
Yes.
Okay, thanks. If I could please have photograph 168. And this is a photograph that was taken when the Sullivans just got together on the morning of July 20th of 2012. And it was on the front page of 97 different newspapers throughout the country. And Ms. Sullivan just asked that, oh, sorry, she has a new married name. Well, formerly, Ms. Megan Sullivan asked if she just wanted to note that it's very sad that when she Googles her name, this is the photograph of her family that comes up, and it's just another impact of the crime. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you.
I also have a statement from Nick Gowie, who was the father of homicide victim Jessica Gowie. My name is Nick Gowie. I am Jessica Gowie's dad. The night Jessica was heading to the theater, she and I talked on the phone around 7 p.m. She needed money, and I told her I would deposit money the next morning. That was the last time I heard her voice. I was so proud of Jessica and the woman she was becoming. Around 2 a.m. local time, our son Jordan called and asked to put him on the speakerphone so that my wife and I would hear what he had to say. He told us Jessica got killed at the theater and he was heading to Colorado. We booked the flight for him with the following instructions. Please confirm the incident. I refused to accept that Jessica got killed. Our neighbors gave us an apple tree that was planted in our front yard. I see the tree every day and I think of Jessica. When Benjamin and I go to the zoo or other amusement parks, I always tell him that this is what I did with Jessica. Benjamin will never forget the day we went to the snake farm and Jessica convinced the owner to let a snake out so that Benjamin could hold it. These past weeks, Benjamin conquered his fears, as he claims, by riding roller coasters. He asked if Jessica had any fear about riding roller coasters. He still remembers Jessica riding the steel eel at SeaWorld. Jessica's name is constantly mentioned. There is emptiness in my heart. Something is missing. I am retired at the present, but I have a dozen albums of our family's trips. I look at the pictures and see Jessica smiling and laughing. There is something missing, her smile, her laughing, and above all, her presence. I have avoided the press and refused to discuss or give any statement. Yes, I lost my daughter. Recently, we discovered films that we sent out to transfer to DVD. One was of our trip to Lake Mead on a houseboat. There was Jessica sitting and singing a Christian song, so young, so pretty, so innocent. This has been stressful. I have had a triple and quadruple bypass and a brain tumor the size that was first removed prior to Jessica's death. Since Jessica's death, I have had 3 major surgeries. I do not handle stress well. While I avoid reading or keeping up with the trial, there isn't a day that goes by that someone doesn't ask how I'm doing. My career was in the hotel business as a general manager. The kids grew up living in the hotel in a 3,000 square foot apartment. I will never forget the day when I saw Jessica standing on a chair with the house phone in her little hand. I said, "Jessica, what are you doing?" Her reply, "Dad, I am hungry. I'm calling room service." I looked up at the ceiling and said, "Lord, please make sure she doesn't get used to this lifestyle." I miss her. I miss her every day, every hour, every minute, and every second. Nothing can ever fill the void in my heart. Thank you, Your Honor. Nick Gowie.
Thank you.
Next, we have a statement from Tina Kuhn.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Tina Marie Kuhn, Tiinamarieceoon. Thank you, Your Honor, for listening to my statement. I am in no way want to diminish from those who lost their loved ones or who were severely injured. But like a rock that's thrown into a lake, there are many ripples. In my story, in my son's story, is just one of these ripples. Tanner Kuhn was 17 years old. That summer day when him and his 2 friends who were brothers were at our house planning to go spend the night and see the movie. They were so excited. My son couldn't wait another minute. He loves Batman. He loved that series. We bought the tickets. And we planned everything out with his parents. I will never forget waking up from an hour of sleep to the girls taking our car to go get him. My husband called and said, wondered what they were doing. And they came back, and my husband and my daughter went to go get Tanner. His sister will never forget the voice that she heard on the phone. I will always remember standing at the door waiting with my daughter Heidi for him to come back. We didn't sit. We just stayed at the door. And while I was waiting, I knew that the movie had already started. And in my mind, I already knew that the shooting didn't happen in the parking lot. I knew that my son wouldn't have been in the parking lot if the movie had started, because he wanted to be there. I knew he wasn't lying, and I knew he wanted to be at Batman. And I knew that there was a shooting in the theater by the time he came through the door. I will never forget the look on his face when he came through the door, and he sobbed and cried to me, said, "Mom, Mom." And then in his head, he started frantically saying, because of the number of bullets that was shot, because of as many magazines as I heard, and how many bullets were in the magazines, and an estimated a number of seats, and he went in this frantic equation very quickly. He deduced, he said, that there had to be at least 10 to 12 people who died, that there had to be 40 to 50 wounded, and he sobbed and collapsed into my arms. I could not say as a mom that my son was there but didn't know what happened. My son, who was very mathematical, loved science, and very analytical, before any news had ever come out about it, had already deduced pretty close to the numbers in his own head. As a mom, I couldn't say that he didn't know. He wrote a paper to go to college called Chaos, and in it he talked about how he thought he was not going to die and all the chaos that happened. He cannot be in a chaotic place anymore. He still hears gunshots. He has been diagnosed with PTSD. After the shootings, he felt it very important to get his story told. And he did many interviews, and I didn't see him very much on Friday. But on the interviews, you can see him tremoring. You can see him jerking. He has hallucinations. He has PTSD, anxiety, depression. He has flashbacks. He hears in crowded rooms gunshots. We have now had to learn about how to deal with triggers and how to deal with long, sleepless nights. When people ask what they want me to pray for my son, I said, just peace and sleep. He would have to go to counseling and deal with this. His sister has PTSD and counseling. I too have had counseling, and I suffer from PTSD as well. But I made the decision painstakingly and with much thought and tears to go back to the theater on opening night. It was the hardest decision, one of them that I've ever made. I did it with the help of the mom of the boys, Karen, who was who was there with my boys. He went, and we all went. I didn't want one person telling me that I couldn't do something or be somewhere or enjoy something ever again. I had to learn in a counseling meeting of my son's counselor with my husband that he blamed himself for not letting the sons go to Southland that night. He talked him into going to the Century Theater because it was closer. And while my son was very outspoken, and he even wrote stuff, he hasn't shared everything. He protected the boys that were younger than him and got them out of the theater despite coughing. He has asthma, and the tear gas triggered his asthma for over a year. My son has not wanted this to impact our family at all. He, like many veteran soldiers, wants to bear it all on his own. But it did. It impacted all of us, whether he wants to admit it or not. He is still trying to protect his friends. He is still a part of their lives, and he's still trying to protect our family this day. This was all caused by one person, by an act of pure evil. You live a good life, you go to church, you do good for people, you love people and others, and you never think that your life is going to be impacted by pure evil. He caused this ripple of evil. It was this horrific, senseless act of violence that impacted my family and my son. But it didn't just impact me or my family. It's impacted the community. Anytime anybody hears that my son was in the theater, they recall exactly where they were and what happened that night. Almost like, you know where you were in Columbine, you know where you were in 9/11. People around here know where you were when the shooting happened and how you found out. And I know the only way to fight evil is love. And love has its endless ripples just as much. I have felt the prayers of the world. I have seen Aurora Public Schools rally around their children. I have seen the city respond to this firsthand. And the first responders, the DA, the police, the FBI, everyone who has been involved, the court, has been amazing. I've met so many victims and survivors and have developed deep, deep friendships. These are some of the silver linings in the storm clouds. This will always be a part of my son's life and my family's life. I hope that you are aware of the impact and how far-reaching it was, and that you will give him the maximum sentence deserved.
Ms. Kuhn, thank you. Mr. Edson?
Thank you, Judge. Your Honor, I have two rather brief ones that I'd like to read. The first one is from theater survivor Jacob Brinek, B-R-I-N-C-K, first name J-A-C-O-B. My impact statement. I am afraid of theaters. I never know what may happen around me. Fireworks bring back memories. The movie itself, Batman will always be different to me now. It will always be a reminder. I'm more emotional than I was. Certain things bother me in movies and TV shows. It's just been hard. Thank you. The second impact statement from Karen Gomez, Karen Gomez, theater survivor. The night of July 19th, 2012 into the early morning of July 20th, 2012 has changed my life forever. When I was thinking about how this night has impacted me, my first thought was it hasn't, maybe because I didn't want it to, or because if I actually admitted that it had some kind of effect on me, then he would win. For months after the incident, I could not sleep. Everything was racing through my mind from that night. What could I have changed? What could I have done differently? Survivor's guilt was eating at me. Then I was angry because my daughter was not sleeping at night and would need the light and TV on just to feel comfortable. This went on for months. Just when she would get comfortable, something else would trigger her, and we were back to the same thing. Her not wanting to leave the house, being uncomfortable at night, to even go into the car. I didn't know how to fix this, so I would stay up at night and worry. I have a hard time dealing with the fact that I meet people who were in that theater where youth and innocence was stripped away from them, and they will never get back their lives, and they will always be altered. What the defendant took away from so many does not define who they are or what they will become, but it has seriously altered their course. I will forgive the defendant for what he has done, but I can say that no matter what the sentence is, the defendant will need to find a way to forgive himself for all of his actions and make peace with himself. I will finish with a quote. Sometimes people haven't apologized because they are ashamed. Forgive them anyway. Sometimes you have to be okay with a sorry you never got. Forgiveness unlocks a blessing. Sincerely, Karen Gomez.
Thank you. Ms. Tish McGuire.
Your Honor, we have a sentencing statement from the Mayor of Aurora, Steve Hogan.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. The impact on the city of Aurora is almost immeasurable. Whether it relates to the individual pain and agony suffered by a victim, family of a victim, those people who were in the theater and who were injured, others who were in the theater who weren't injured but still suffered through the experience. Whether it is 9/11 emergency communications phone people, whether it's police officers, firefighters, ambulance drivers, doctors, nurses, who all responded that evening, whether it is the literally 10,000 people who turned out to a vigil just a couple days after this horrific incident, who turned out to support each other, to hold hands and say, it's going to be okay. They needed to be there. Whether it's the people who today still come to the Aurora Resilience Center to receive free mental health services, because that's a conscious decision that the city of Aurora made. We would provide free mental health services to any individual for as long as it takes as long as they say they were in some way impacted by this tragedy. Whether it is the newspaper headlines and the impact of the headlines that say Aurora theater shooting, whether it is attending a conference, not just in the United States, but elsewhere in the world, and being introduced as the mayor of Aurora, Colorado. And the first words out of someone's mouth, even years later, are, "I'm so sorry." Whether it is working in my office every day and walking over to my window and seeing the theater from my office window. The impact on Aurora is almost beyond measure. I speak with other mayors from other cities who have gone through a tragedy of their own. And they all say to me, this will take years. It will take years for you as an individual because you happen to be there, you happen to be the person in office. But it will take years for your community to get past this. It won't go away. It will appear in a headline. It will appear on a YouTube video. It will appear as a 5th anniversary or a 10th anniversary or a 15th anniversary. And it will take years for the impact to begin to be reduced. I can't imagine what it must be like to be a family member of one of the victims. I can't imagine that. But I can imagine what I have to deal with as the mayor of the city of Aurora regularly, wherever I go and whatever I do. And I know if those comments are made to me by others, well-intentioned, they're comments that are made throughout the community. I would hope, I would pray that to help bring closure, the process of healing and moving us all along, that in this case, the sentence that be determined be the maximum sentence. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Brock.
Thank you, Your Honor. This is a victim impact statement about the impact on a relative of Alex Sullivan. The court probably well knows now that that guy murdered Alex by shooting him in the chest with a rifle. This is from Jean Collins, Jeanne Collins, Collins, mother-in-law of homicide victim Alex Sullivan. What did I learn from Alex? To live a good life, one that cared about others, those he knew, and complete strangers. He treated everyone like they mattered because to him they did. He listened and dreamed. He loved his wife, family, friends, his God, and his faith. He had a great joy and also struggled with challenges presented to him, but it did not get him down. His presence made a difference. He had a joyful spirit, sense of humor, and loved expressing himself through his large physical body. Yes, he found joy for what God gave him. He protected those he cared about gently. He corrected those around him gently, standing up for what is good and right. His spirit had its own language of love. Anyone connecting or just talking with him felt it. What I know for sure is he is with the Father, and has heard the words, quote, "Well done, good and faithful servant," end quote. He has pleased our God for eternity. There is no greater reward. Our time here is short, and Alex made each day count. I recall a post of Alex's that stated he didn't know what his purpose in life was. What I find amazing is he was living his purpose every moment and never knew how he truly blessed us all, including strangers that would meet him. Alex had random acts of kindness behind the scenes and delighted in knowing they would help some he would never know. I was blessed to witness Alex sitting at my mom's bedside after an acute heart attack and watching for the first time someone receiving a blood transfusion that would save her life. He gave gallons and gallons of blood to help anyone and finally saw the blessing of his act right in front of him, someone he loved. Alex, I'm better for knowing you, watching you, listening to your heart and sincerity. I will always love you and be grateful for the 5.5 years I had with you. I knew in my heart how special you were the day I met you. I knew you were genuine. You came into our lives at a time of our greatest hurt, Cassie's dad's death. You were there for her from the start and never left her side. I recall praying over Cassie when she was just a child on a daily basis, and I also prayed for the little boy that would grow up to be her husband. Little did I know this little boy would show up in her life at the most difficult time in her life and hold, love, and support her from that day forward. You made my daughter the luckiest girl in the world. I will always love you for that. I miss you, Alex. You are one of God's greatest gifts. I will always love you dearly. I thank God for you.
Thank you. Ms. Stitch McGuire.
I have a statement from Heather Bailey.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Heather Bailey, Heather, Bailey, Bailey. I'm the mother of attempted victim Kaylin Bailey, who was with Veronica during the shooting. I want to thank the court, the DA's office, and the Aurora Police Department, especially Sergeant Mike Hopkins, for helping Kaylin get out of the theater, the victim advocates for being there throughout the whole ordeal. I want to start by saying our lives were forever changed on the 19th of July, 2012, when Ashley and Jameson dropped off Veronica for Kaylin and Haley to be babysat for Ashley's ultrasound. We were welcoming a new baby to the family, and everybody was very excited. When Ashley and Jameson got back to my house, we ordered a pizza and talked about the movie. The kids were so excited, and the adults were debating about if Veronica should go or not. Ashley and Jameson were looking at myself and my husband, Sean, for an answer. And to this day, I am so filled with guilt because I remember saying that she is only 6 years old and she will probably fall asleep in about 30 minutes. So they took her. And the first movie was sold out, so they ended up in Theater 9. Kaylin packed a pillow
for her and Veronica to lay on. Veronica always wanted to hang out with the big girls, and Kaylin always wanted a little sister. On July 20th, 2012, my daughter Kaylin Bailey lost her innocence. It was stripped away at the age of 13. She saw things that night that she is still trying to protect me from, that most people should never see in their lives. She had to step over bodies to get out of the theater. Kaylin and Haley were left alone, being separated from Jameson and Ashley, who were taken to Aurora South Hospital. They finally made it across the street with a construction worker who held on to them until Kaylin's daddy came to pick them up and to take her to the hospital to meet up with Jameson and Ashley, who was already being taken into surgery. My husband, Sean, took the lead of the family. Things had to be done, and with no emotion, he was taking care of everything, putting himself and his feelings aside. He took care of Jameson when he was just discharged from the hospital with fragments still in his head. He left a message for Ashley's mom, Rita, and called me at work. At the time, I had been working for Frontier Airlines for 13 years on the overnight shift. When he called me at work, I didn't know anything about what was going on. All he told me was that there was an accident and I had to leave work now. Kaylin was okay, but Ashley was in surgery. I couldn't get out of there fast enough. I called Sean from my car, and he told me that they couldn't find Veronica. We made the decision that since I was coming on Pena, I would stop at Children's, and I would look for her at Children's first. As I drove on Pena, I looked around thinking, where are all the cars? And could I speed? Would the police understand if I got pulled over? I had no idea all the police were at the theater. I arrived at Children's. It was so busy trying to explain my situation, that Ashley was in surgery, what Veronica was wearing. She was just a little girl who didn't understand what was going on, and that I was there to be with her. She was just scared that she was too little to tell them anything. I got nowhere. Keep in mind, my husband was still trying to do what he could from Aurora South with the police there. When I left Children's, I went to the university next door. They were more organized. They took my info, and I sat waiting for them to look in the back for a little girl, 6 years old, with my description. They finally came back and said no one fit my description. Everyone in the waiting room wished me luck, and I was on my way to another hospital. On my way to the car, Sean called and said they found Veronica. She had been at Children's the whole time, and to go back there. I met an officer who confirmed she was there, but because I was not family, I could not be let in. I was devastated. Although she was not supposed to, the officer did confirm Veronica had been gravely injured, but could not go into detail. Even though she told me that, I still didn't believe her. She warned me Ian was on his way, and I needed to leave. So I finally was on my way to see my baby.
I will never forget that first hug. It lasted forever. The morning of the 20th, we were all very lost, not knowing what to do or where to go. The days to follow were beyond words. Our house became where everyone came. Family flew in from everywhere. All I could do was cry. I was a mess. We tried to see Ashley in the hospital, but we were refused, and this devastated Kaylin. When the word finally came about Veronica, Sean and I took Kaylin aside and had to tell her that Veronica had passed away. We all cried. Then word came about the unborn baby. Once again, we pulled Kaylin aside and cried with her again. When Kaylin started getting calls and texts from reporters and news outlets. Imagine my 13-year-old getting these calls. Someone in the theater gave a reporter her number without permission from us. Before we knew it, the story was out that Kaylin had tried to give CPR to Veronica and called 911. We were prisoners in our own home. We always left it up to Kaylin, who she wanted to speak to, and she only gave about a handful of interviews. To this day, they still contact her. She is done with interviews. My daughter had to grow up very fast, making adult decisions. She doesn't let me hug her anymore. She would not allow me into the courtroom when she testified because she was afraid I would break down. She suffers from PTSD and survivor's guilt because she couldn't do more for Veronica. I could only get her to do about 1 year of therapy before she quit. Her first 2 years after the shooting, she missed several days of school, and she went from being an A student to dropping down and getting C's and struggling in school. The first year after, she went to a very small school, and she became known as the girl in the theater. Kaylin still gets upset, and at times, with us. She has triggers such as anniversary dates, Veronica's birthday, the shooting anniversary. Both can bring on a depression. Loud noises still upset her, like fireworks, sirens, and flashing lights. As far as her father and I, our marriage has become extremely strained. Our wedding anniversary is 2 days before the shooting and has always been shadowed by it. I have had to reach out for therapy and medication because of the guilt, depression, and sorrow has been too much for me. We are living on my husband's income because in June of 2013, I was on my way to court to hear the defendant plead insane when I was in an accident and I was rear-ended, which has resulted in me having 3 neck surgeries. By the end of September of this year, I will have had the 3 neck surgeries, and I'm heavily medicated. I had to retire from my job, and I can no longer work. As a family, we love to go to the movies several times a week. Kaylin started going back after a year. Sean and I recently tried going back to a matinee movie, and we got through it with little anxiety. We all miss Veronica very much, and we were robbed of enjoying a baby into our family, and Ashley didn't deserve what she has to live with anymore. We are all forever changed. We ask for the hardest punishment allowed by this court with no mercy. Thank you, Heather Bailey, the mother of Kaylin Bailey.
Thank you, Mrs. Pavey.
Thank you. Thanks, Lisa.
Mr. Orman?
Your Honor, this is a victim impact statement from Racina Cowan, theater survivor. I have one daughter and will never have another child. She is my life, and I've often said she saved my life. The defendant tried to take her from me. The overwhelming emotional damage the defendant has inflicted on those who survive can never be completely healed, at least not for me. I say a prayer every day for the children the defendant took from their families. At the same time, I give thanks that for some reason my child was spared and I was also spared. For some reason the defendant's life has been spared. I have to live with knowing the person intent on taking the part of my world that matters to me more than my own life will continue to live his life. If the defendant must live, I do not want the defendant to forget what he has done to those of us who weren't injured or murdered at his hand. We also live with the memory, we also relive moments, and we also have had our lives permanently changed by his choice and not ours. I can't let him live not knowing that we too suffered and continue to try and redefine our lives, which now includes the horrible, atrocious, devastating event that impacted our lives forever. I grieve for those who were taken. I grieve for those who were permanently scarred. I grieve for those of us who survived. Never can the defendant forget we are also the defendant's victims. Racina Cowan.
Can you spell the first and last names, please?
Certainly, Your Honor. R-E-S-E-N-N-A. Last name, C-O-W-A-N.
Thank you. Ms. Stitch McGuire?
Aurora Police Detective Craig Apple.
Detective Apple, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, sir. Craig Apple, C-R-A-I-G-A-P-P-E-L. Will speak as a detective assigned to the largest mass murder case ever to happen in Colorado or possibly the country. Been doing this job for over 30 years. Past 8 years investigating homicides and working with the FBI. I've been involved in over 160 homicide investigations. While I was in high school, I lost my father to a shooting. I also have a young daughter, would have been the age of Veronica. Judge, I remember testifying in front of you back in September 2011 when one Marine shot and killed his good friend playing around with a gun one night in Aurora. All homicides are tragedies. This case affected myself and other members of the homicide unit more than others. We have recovered, or at least maybe on the surface. Major crime unit, commonly called the homicide unit, is comprised of 12 detectives and 2 sergeants. Usually it's a noisy, fun place to work. A lot of kidding goes around, nothing sacred. Everything's off limits. We average between 18 and 28 homicides a year in Aurora. We deal with death usually on a daily basis. You have to be a different breed to work homicides. However, the weeks after this incident, it was eerie silence in our office. Not to joking, Nothing going on other than working 18 hours a day, not seeing your family. Slowly, we moved on. However, 2 weeks later, we had an arson murder 1 block away from 1690 Paris Street. We had to take care of that while this was going on. Fortunately, we had the help of the FBI, my partner on the case, Special Agent Jeremy Phelps, ATF, numerous other law enforcement agencies. We had a job to do, and we did it. There was no playbook. There were no other cases similar to this in the size and amount of information that was coming in. During this case, I did not have a chance to get to know all the victims, and I apologize for that. Usually a homicide, 1 or 2 victims, we can get to know the victims. This case was too large. I had to stay focused and try to not get real emotional about it because I knew the large task ahead. And I was also worried about making a mistake on one of the largest cases in the state's history. But we had a good team. And that team included George Brockler and his attorneys. And also the paralegals, both on the state side and the defense side that I had to work with. I spent over 100 hours with the defense team viewing evidence to make sure it was going to be a fair trial and they had access to everything. I sat twice against the defendant and interviewed him. No different than any other murders I've interviewed. But I had to think, what kind of person could hurt so many people? Pure evil. No regard for human life other than himself. It's hard to understand. I remember the early hours of July 20th, 2012, walking the interior of the theater. I will never forget the victims laying in those positions. And they were only there trying to escape life for a couple hours with friends and family watching the movie. I will never forget the smell of the theater, popcorn, soda, and all the other things. Then later that day, walking the apartment crime scene outside with Special Agent Gumbiner. Thinking to myself, what other death and destruction that this guy intended to do? Made no sense. In my 30 years of law enforcement, I've never had to deal with such good people all in one case. In the homicide unit, usually we deal with people who become victims that have made bad decisions in their lifestyles. But not these victims. These innocent victims were there to enjoy a movie, and one guy decided that human life meant nothing. I want to thank the Sheriff's Office for providing security in and out of the courtroom. I think we all have to remember they overheard all the pain that was going on in this courtroom for the preceding months. Looking back, I remember standing outside the theater on July 20th, 2012 when I arrived at the scene. I had just come back from a shoulder surgery and was kind of a fresh body, as we say. I remember observing the chaos, hearing screams of injured victims, screams of people trying to find their loved ones, hearing the numerous media helicopters flying above the theater. I'm thinking to myself, is this Hollywood? What's going on here? Later I found out it was not Hollywood, it was real life. I believe in God. I go to church, not as much as I should. While standing with other homicide detectives outside the theater that night, I received a phone call from Detective Chuck Mell. Detective Mell told me to meet him at headquarters to interview the suspect. I would be lead detective on the case. While making the short drive over to headquarters, I took a couple deep breaths. And I was thinking to myself, what type of monster could have done this to all these innocent people when they were trying to enjoy an evening at the theater? Today I continue to ask God, how can one guy hurt so many good people? Judge, I thank you for controlling the case. I was worried that this was going to be a media circus, and it wasn't. You also had to sit through all this painful testimony and still keep in control of the courtroom. Sum it up, we have all changed over the past 3 years. I'm wearing these glasses a lot more and a lot of memories. The Aurora Police Department Homicide Unit will continue to investigate homicides. We will continue to fight the good fight, and we can only hope the victims will continue to survive. And that guy realizes the harm that he has done to thousands of people. Thank you, Judge.
Thank you, Detective. Ms. Pearson.
Your Honor, this is a statement from Mary Kay Barg, who is the aunt of homicide victim Alex Sullivan, and Barg is B-A-R-G. My name is Mary Kay Barg, Aunt Kitty to Alex Sullivan. I would like to let the court know that Alex's death has not only affected my life as an aunt back here in Macedon, New York, but all of Alex's cousins and other friends of the family. We remember Alex when he was little, his bear-like hugs, and being able to call and talk with him about everyday activities he was involved with. Alex had a laugh and smile that would brighten anyone's day. That will be missed forever. When I call to talk with my sister Terry, Alex's mom, I find it very difficult to let her know how my son is doing. There are times we can talk and have a few laughs, but there are times Terry will call me at any hour because she is emotionally drained. I have always been here for Terry and always will, but nothing will ever bring my little sister back to who she truly was. Terry lost a son. I still have mine, and as a mother of a firstborn son, I cannot, in the deepest part of my heart, feel that loss that my sister Terry, brother-in-law Tom, and niece Megan are feeling and going to feel for the rest of their lives. Yes, we do have great memories, wonderful pictures of Alex with a smile that are implanted in my mind and heart, but those do not replace the times we would all be together at family gatherings. For example, Alex's sister Megan was just married and he was not there to hug, laugh, joke around, and make more memories with. Sincerely, Aunt Kitty.
Thank you. Ms. Stitch McGuire.
Austin Laborde.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Your Honor.
Spell your last name for me, please.
Yes, sir. Laborde.
Thank you. Go ahead.
This is tough to sit here and listen to everything, so bear with me. 3 years ago, I'm in Cancun, Mexico, and I'm heading home. I just graduated high school, and I can see on the news there was a shooting in Colorado, and I could tell, from what I could read in Spanish that it was in Aurora, and I didn't think of anyone. I didn't really know. I lived in Highlands Ranch, a good 20-minute drive away. I called my friends that I thought, possibly could have been around that area to make sure they were okay. Packed my bags, headed for the airport to come back home. I'm sitting at the gate waiting, and my mom picks up her phone, and she kind of gasps for air. And I ask her what's wrong, and she can't say anything. So eventually I grab her phone after a few seconds, and I read what she had just read. And what she had just read stated that my best friend, Yusuf Meki Garbi, I refer to him as my tangible miracle sometimes, was shot in the head by the defendant sitting in front of you today. He didn't succeed in his goal to take away my best friend, thankfully. However, the hurt that he caused is unmeasurable in my mind. The reason I stand here today is because for 3 years I always thought to myself, if I had the chance to address, give my side of things, let people in on how I felt, that I'd be ready. You know, that I had so much emotion built up from everything that had gone on. And as I stand here today trembling in front of you, I'm still not ready. My thanks goes to you, Your Honor, Lisa, George, all of you guys, the jury. They've put in countless hours. I've shown up at the district attorney's office down the street for an interview at 8 o'clock at night, and these guys are still there. And that interview goes for an hour and a half. This may not be the last of Mr. Holmes' days, but he is, in my opinion, not way tough enough to withstand what he has to face. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Tish-McGuire.
I have a victim impact statement from Joan Hawley, who was the apartment owner of the apartment complex the defendant filled with explosives and incendiary devices. On July 21st, I got a call at 6 a.m. in the morning. It was a reporter about my building and my tenant, Mr. James Holmes. From there, it was a nightmare for the next 1.5 years. I was afraid for myself, afraid for my tenants, afraid for my workers, afraid for the police that night, and afraid for weeks and weeks after. Afraid for the workers, and I was afraid about the harassment from the reporters, the constant calls, the constant friction, the constant attempts to get information that I would not give. Always wondering, what else did the defendant set up in the building that might potentially still kill someone? The apartment, no longer rentable, lost income of $180,000. I finally had to sell the building for about $200,000 to $300,000 less than the building was worth. I could not do it anymore. I went to a psychiatrist many times. This incident reflected on my childhood issues and caused a great deal of emotional upsetness, fearness, and it was very difficult for me to do anything. It was difficult for me to run my business, and I had so many losses as a result of this incident. I cannot explain enough the constant trauma that resulted as a result of the defendant's crimes. The loss of money was over $480,000, and it's probably not recoverable, but should be paid by the defendant. He should get the maximum sentence that is possible, and he should never be released. His apology would be worthless. He doesn't care, and he got exactly what he wanted in all of his fame. Thank you, Your Honor. Joan Hawley.
All right, thank you.
Now have a statement from Karen Campbell.
Can you move?
I apologize. Sorry about that.
That's okay. I think she was doing it on purpose. Good
Hello.
afternoon.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. We would like to say thank you for the opportunity for us to present our side. My name is Karen Campbell, and I am the mother of Kevin Campbell, who is a friend of Michaela Medic. July 19th, 2012. So the day for Kevin and his friends. There were 7 of them that went to the theater together, Kevin and Michaela and 5 others. They were thrilled, excited to be going to the Batman movie. This was something they had done for years, going to midnight mass movies. He was an energetic, outgoing, happy, carefree young man. July 20th, 2012, changed his life forever. He came out of there traumatized, terrified, not knowing or understanding what happened. It has changed him mentally, physically, and mentally. The loss of Michaela will forever affect him. After he got out of the building, he was also on staff at Gateway High School for 3 years. Therefore, he knew majority of the Gateway students that were there that night. After he got out of the building, there was a mass of Gateway students that came up to him and asked Mr. Campbell what was going on and what had happened. He did not have the opportunity to process what he went through from the time he stepped out of the building until the time the students came up to him. We got the first phone call at 12:45 a.m. I originally answered our house phone to someone who was screaming hysterically and out of control. This was not my son. He has never been like this. It took me several moments to try to get through to him. And eventually my parents picked up their phone and their extension because they understood how upset I was becoming. During that first phone call, I was able to get through to him that he needed to find his friends and he needed to find Michaela. Half an hour later, that second phone call came through. He was somewhat calmer. He had located his friends, but they still were minus Michaela. They spent the next several minutes scouring through the parking lot, trying to find their friend. He called once again to inform us that they were on their way to Gateway High School. When they were leaving Gateway High School, Michaela's family arrived there, and her father came up to all the kids and was trying to find out what happened to Michaela. He then found my son and asked my son why did he leave his daughter in the theater. They would spend that weekend at one of his friend's house. We were notified, he called us after they got at the house. Over the weekend, we saw Kevin, starting that day, we saw Kevin shutting down and turning inward. In his mind, he knew that Michaela was gone. It took his heart longer to process that. The sounds that she made and her last statement that she made was forever burned into his memory. It is something he will live with for the rest of his life. My mother and I arrived over to his friend's house. It hurt us both very much to watch him emotionally and mentally shut down as a way to deal with his pain. He would not allow either one of us to walk up to him and comfort him or to hold him. He believed he was afraid that if we did, he would break down and burst into tears. He was trying to remain strong for the rest of his friends. During that day, I would try to get him to eat, even something little, and he chose not to. His friends were asked to go to Michaela's house that night. They all arrived there. There was a large group of friends. When Michaela's family heard the news that she had passed in the theater, their lives were forever changed. Her friends, several of them, screamed, cried, fell down and collapsed on the ground, hysterical, could not believe that their friend was gone. Her family, especially her grandmother, had asked my son to go into great detail the last moments of Michaela's life in that theater. He did not want his grandmother to be by his side when he gave those details. Another woman was able to go with him. He went into great detail the exact moments of Michaela's last of her life in that theater, how happy she was and excited to be there. He continued to feel the pain of losing Michaela and did not want either my mom or myself around him, so he continued to be there for the rest of her friends. At the viewing of Michaela's funeral, he was sitting on the curb in tears once again, as they were all still trying to process. He would not allow me to comfort him. The only thing I could do was put my hand on his shoulder to let him know that I would always be there for him. I had seen him that weekend, and I had saw the blood splatter on his clothes. That got to me more than anything else in the world. As a mother, it was very hard as I began to realize how close he came to losing his own life. It could have very well been his own blood besides the blood of other people on him. That to me was very hard. I wanted to scream, I wanted to shout, and I wanted to break many things. We got him through the viewing. The next day was her services. A lot of her friends were her pallbearers. There was a family member of Michaela's that backed out the last minute. It took every willpower in Kevin to step up to be a pallbearer in assisting with Michaela's coffin. Every single one of the boys were in tears as they carried the coffin, the waiting hearse. It was the hardest thing he had ever had to do in his life, and that was after a very difficult week. Both my dad and my son had horrific nightmares following this shooting for weeks. With my dad, his nightmare came in a vision of him being in the theater during the shooting and seeing Kevin without being able to assist him in any way. Dad could visually see himself in the theater, and the fact that he could not help his grandson nearly destroyed him mentally and emotionally. With Kevin, his nightmares lasted every night for over a month. He never told us about the nature of these nightmares, even to this day. It was his thinking that he would spare his mom the helplessness, feeling, and the hurt that she would eventually feel. During this time, Kevin also experienced the survivor's guilt and started questioning himself on what if I had done this or what if I had done that would have kept Michaela from being murdered. He also felt like he failed as an Eagle Scout by not being able to do more in saving Michaela and preventing other individuals from getting hurt or being killed. Watching him wrestle with the survivor's guilt took a toll on my family, as it was very painful for all of us to watch this inner turmoil. Also during this time, Kevin and his group of friends who went to the theater struggled to dull the pain along with the fear and the nightmares of what they went through. Also, a lot of their friends hoped that anything would mask the hurt and grief for Michaela's murder. They did not have a coping mechanism for dealing with the tragedy of the horrific crime and the death of Michaela. The first part of August, Kevin returned back to work with the school district and the elementary school where he was working. He walked into his office and had a meltdown because his office had been rearranged and not in the same place as it was at the end of the school year. He had to leave the building and return home in tears as it was too much for him to handle. He could not go back to work for the rest of the week. He would eventually go back to work. Kevin continued to work at Vista Peak and was in his office sitting at his desk while he was looking at the internet and had watched the events unfolding in Sandy Hook, Connecticut about the mass shooting which killed 20 children and 6 adults. This was in December 2012. This news was extraordinarily difficult for Kevin as a shooting survivor. Even he decided at the end of that semester to leave work and tried to go to college he went to college for 1 semester. Even at college, he continued to struggle on a daily basis, emotionally and mentally, to include having difficulties with concentrating on his studies, along with completing homework assignments. Once again, this was also very difficult on my family to watch him struggle while he was in college. He had struggles while he was working and while he was in school. In December 2012, Kevin started to experience medical problems with his stomach as a result of the trauma he experienced. This was also very difficult to watch him struggle with this health problem and not knowing if it was the stress and anxiety that was causing this problem. He was put on medication for that health issues, and he is still on the medication now. For the next few months, we would watch his struggle with the depression as he would sleep most of the day and then stay up all night playing video games or computer games. It was a struggle to get him to leave the house on most occasions. This would go on for the next 2 years with battling depression. This would evolve into an emotional and mental roller coaster with Kevin to the point where it caused great stress for his grandparents and his mother, to also include the anger that he was experiencing. We would never know if he was having a good day or a really bad day. Kevin's trauma affected his relationship with his grandparents in a very negative way. It was very emotional for all of us. Kevin would eventually tell my mom and his grandmother what had been going on and that he wanted to get immediate mental health therapy, as he felt his world was falling apart and there was nothing he could do to stop the downward spiral. I would try to get him the help that he so desperately needed through his insurance, but to no avail, as they would not listen to the urgency in the phone conversation. His friends had also noticed the deep depression that Kevin had fallen into, and also tried to work with him by inviting him to social gatherings and into their homes for evenings with friends. They would invite him to different games and other outings just to encourage him to leave the house. Although before the shooting it was a large group of friends, it has since split off into several small groups of friends who are now having problems in communicating with each other, and in some cases cannot communicate with certain individuals while can communicate with others. During the first 2 years after the shooting and before Kevin went to sleep, in his mind, he would replay the entire horrific crime in the hopes to keep it fresh in his head in case he had to testify. He also could not shut it off by himself, so it would take him a while before he could fall asleep and stay asleep until the morning. During the last 3 years, Kevin has not been able to sleep without some kind of light in his room at all times. In the beginning, in September 2014, Kevin once again mentioned to my mom and his grandmother the need to go to counseling in order to get his anger and depression under control. With the assistance of his therapist, his recovery, and he has been in it for a year on a weekly basis, we have seen a tremendous change in his life, from his attitude, outlook on life, to healing him with his anger and his depression. We will forever be grateful to his therapist in assisting with his recovery. He will forever remember Michaela Maddock and A.J. Boyk, along with the 3 injured victims that he knew from Gateway High School, as it is his hope to always carry their memories with him for the rest of his life. He will always think of Michaela with her smiles and laughter and what he calls Kayla's memories. As for A.J., he will always remember him as a student from Gateway while he was on staff with the school. It is his hope to always carry them for the rest of his life. As for my parents and myself, this horrific tragedy has also forever changed our lives, and is with knowledge that we will move forward into the future and the challenges it will hold for our family. With myself, I have also sought counseling treatments and have been seeing my therapist on a weekly basis since the first part of December 2014. For my son, he has been the light and joy of my life. His sense of humor and his outlook on life has been incredible to witness while he was growing up. He credits the man that he has become to his late great-grandfather and his grandfather, as they both taught him valuable life skills. He is a caring, giving, and compassionate young man who would put others before him in most cases. Kevin has always been able to assist other individuals when they need help, or just being there in general. The assistance goes for family and friends. While Kevin was in the theater in July 1920 and 2012, while he was fighting the bullets flying around him and for his life, as it would have taken just one bullet in either his chest or his head to take his life, I have given it great thought and decisions over the past 3 years. If he had been murdered along with Michaela, what my life would be like after his death. I would have lost the best and biggest part of me. It would have caused a big empty hole in my life to hear him calling me Mom, as that would have hurt deeply not to hear those 3 little letters anymore. Would have missed him greatly in what he would have brought to life and to those around him, and who he would have come in contact with even in his own life. I would have never seen him fall in love, get married, and then someday have a family of his own. I also would have not had the opportunity to watch him grow and mature as he got older. It would have left a deep void in my life, and a difficult one to replace, as he is my only child. My mom and I have had this discussion on several occasions, and we came to the conclusion that we would have grieved his loss tremendously, along with the vitality that he would have brought to our lives. We'd also tried to go on with our own lives, carrying the memories that we have of him growing up, and try to move forward in assisting other individuals. We would never have been bitter about him being killed, as we know that he had lived his life the way he wanted. The last 3 years have been extremely difficult on my entire family, as we have had to deal with the horrific crime and tragedy that took place in the theater shooting. My parents have had to deal with their own anger issues along with their own depressions. My dad had been working with homebound students. He has had to take time off and to deal with his own depression and his own hurt feelings. My mom has had difficulty sometimes in her own job with the stress and the anger and her own depression. We are all hoping that someday we will be able to completely move forward. Although this horrific crime has forever changed our lives, we firmly believe in moving forward and live our lives to our best ability. Why we will never forget Michaela Medic or the hopes of not letting the others be forgotten whose lives were lost during the shooting. We hope to be able to pay it forward with assisting other victims of crimes. It is my hope to become involved with the victims' rights. We cannot thank the court enough, Your Honor enough, all the law enforcement agencies, the Aurora Police Department, the FBI, ATF, anyone else who is involved, the fire departments, the EMTs, the prosecuting attorneys have done an incredible job in assisting with this case. We sincerely thank everyone. Thank you very much, Your Honor, for your allowing me to do this.
Thank you. Mr. Edson?
Your Honor, a victim impact statement from Amy Cook, theater survivor. July 20th, 2012, 3 minutes, 180 seconds. 1,000. Just that quickly in the flash of a muzzle blast, life for me and family was forever altered. There is no sentence length that will ever bring back Alex Sullivan, A.J. Boyk, Gordon Cowden, Michaela Medic, Veronica Mosher Sullivan, John Larimer, Jonathan Blunk, Rebecca Wingo, Matt McQuinn, Jessica Gowie, Jesse Childers, Alex Teves were the piece of my soul that left that night along with them. I say their names out loud, as I will always carry them in my heart and in my soul. What started as a tragedy has now become a routine of daily challenges. I would be lying if I said this didn't emotionally affect me. The battlefield of that night was very one-sided, with no way to fight back. The images of carnage and broken bodies will never completely leave me. My heart aches in my struggle to see my family struggle, knowing that we left Alex Teves that night instead of carrying him out. Our daughter has no desire at this time to walk back into a theater and still gets angry when my spouse and I go to the movies. The job that I have enjoyed for years has been a continual series of routines and frustrations. I battle my ability to be effective in helping inmates to take accountability for their crimes, crimes which impacted their victims and their victims' families on a very deep emotional and personal level. For that, I want to hate this defendant. I am not hiding under a seat in fear on a blood-stained floor in a dark theater today. No, instead I am standing, and he can clearly see me now. I will heal eventually from the physical and emotional wounds. I will continue to rise from his actions and return to greatness, changing the world one life at a time. I am winning. However, everyone, even he deserves redemption. I can hear my grandparents who have passed on, and my parents, clearly in my head, reminding me of the biblical principles I was raised on and believe. Amy, Jesus did not come for the faithful. He came for the lost sinner that needs an abundance of grace and love which only his shed blood provides. In closing, I ask that this court give the defendant the maximum consecutive sentences allowable by law. He should be given every opportunity to hear and heed God's calling on his soul and heart. My final act is one of love, to move forward and heal my own soul. Heeding God's call, today I forgive James Egan Holmes for his crimes against me. To 1,000, I forgive you, Amy Cook, August 14th, 2015.
Thank you. Ms. Teach McGuire?
Stephen Hernandez.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. I am Stephen Hernandez. It's Stevenhernandez. I'm Rebecca Wingo. I'm her little brother. She was my big sister. The effects that cowardly act committed that night continue to ripple through our family. Well, now I describe it as ripples. It was more like a tsunami when it hit me on that day. That day, all I heard about was the massacre in Aurora Theater. As I drove around that day at work, on the radio, it was all I heard. I was unable to contact my mother that day, or my sister, and they both lived in Aurora. I had a terrible feeling the whole day, and it was not until after work late in the day on July 20th, while at home, where my wife and I were discussing the possibilities of leaving that night to Colorado, when I received a call from my stepmother, Judy, who told me that Rebecca was in the theater with a guy, and this guy had made it out. Judy gave me his phone number, so I called him up, and this is when I was told that he was in the theater with my sister, and that Rebecca was bleeding in the theater when he last saw her. I was devastated with this news, and I shared this info with my mother, as she had spent the whole day, as many did, searching, wanting desperately to find out what happened to the loved ones. I had spoken with her twice during her search and understood the likelihood of Rebecca being dead. The following 3 weeks were the most difficult 3 weeks of my life. Rebecca was the big sister any little brother would love to have and all I could ever ask for. I am constantly reminded of her beauty in life while she never had a chance to meet my youngest, my little boy, Stephen, who was born in the aftermath of the massacre. Or does she get to see the joy in my daughters, Cassidy and Kaylee, as they dance around their little brother as their father DJs? She would be so proud of me. She would be very proud of all of us. I am very proud of all of us. I see our sister in my beautiful nieces that she left our family. I see her in myself. I see she knew a way of being, a way where love mattered most. In the aftermath of this cowardly act, I am not the same person, and my loved ones have paid the price for it. While I choose not to go into detail of my struggle, I am sure I need therapy and medication. But what I really need is to love, and it is hard to love when you are mad. I have been mad, selfishly mad. Mad from the moment my sister was taken away. And now I will go back home to a loving family while this boy, a coward, killer of innocence, finds love in a jail cell. It is my hope now that this coward can experience an immediate higher level of terror while in prison. And I would like to suggest that this boy is never allowed to procreate and spread his seed. That is all I ask. Thank you, Judge.
Thank you. Mr. Brockler? Are there any other folks that you want to call?
Yes, sir.
Oh, okay. Well, before we do, if you have, how many more do you have? Do you know?
I think we should have said it's 2 written statements to read, and I don't know about... I'm sorry? 10 written statements, anyone else? This is going to help. 10 written statements to finish up.
Then why don't we take our afternoon break
Yes, sir.
at this time, and then we'll continue. And then, Mr. King, do you know if anybody wants to address the court on behalf of your client?
I don't believe so, but I can check over the break.
Okay. All right, and so I think what we'll do is we'll finish with the statements that you have left, Mr. Brockler. I'll check with Mr. King at that point to see if anyone wants to address the court on behalf of the defendant. And then at that point, we'll proceed to the argument by the attorneys. I know that's a little different than what I had outlined before, but I think it makes the most sense. So at that point, we'll proceed with counsel's statements and arguments, starting with the prosecution's arguments and statements, and then the defense's arguments and statements. And then if we finish by the end of the day, then I'll have my sentence tomorrow, okay? I do, and I will provide that. Okay? All right, thank you. The court will be in recess. Let's be back in 20 minutes. Let's make it a little more. Let's make it 3:30, all right? The court will be in recess. Thanks.